1943 opened with a note of optimism from across the Atlantic. President Roosevelt said to Congress,
"We believe that the Nazis and the fascists have asked for it, and they're going to get it."
One of the first steps towards that desirable end was the epoch-making meeting of Churchill and Roosevelt at Casablanca. Here, plans for the year's offensive were laid, and the terms to be offered to the enemy condensed into the two words, unconditional surrender. February brought pictures of the raising of the Union Jack over Tripoli, the last remaining city of the former Italian Empire. The mixed population greeted our glorious Eighth Army like long-lost brothers. At crossroads outside the city, the formal surrender of the town was made by the Vice-Governor of Libya to General Montgomery, whose very informality has endeared him to every man under his command. Monty's entry into Tripoli gave his fighting men the thrill of their lives. But a further thrill was in store for them when a big plane brought our much-traveled Prime Minister personally to congratulate General Montgomery on the 8th's brilliant achievement. Thus, two great men met. Roosevelt said the fascists were going to get it, and Monty was giving it. In March, we were happy to present the epic story of the liberation of Stalingrad by our gallant Russian allies. The end of 163 days of siege, with 22 Nazi divisions trapped. Field Marshal Paulus, supreme commander of the German armies at Stalingrad, fell into Russian hands. It was this man who urged his troops to resist to the death on pain of dire penalties to their families if they surrendered. He, however, preferred to be alive as a prisoner than dead as a hero. The red banner again flew over the town, and a never-ending stream of dejected prisoners passed into internment camps. The fourth month brought us to the 25th anniversary of our Grand Royal Air Force, which had grown in those 2.5 decades into one of the most potent war factors. To bomber and fighter crews alike, we owe an enormous debt. Shall we ever forget how the RAF saved us in those dark days of the Battle of Britain? One thing is certain, the Luftwaffe never will. Around this time, the United States Air Corps intensified their daylight attacks on Germany, helping to shake Nazism to its foundations. Many times onwards to the close of the old year, did we record further exploits of our cousins in the air. The month of May brought us pictures of the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, when Australian and American airmen annihilated a convoy of 22 Japanese ships, and just for full measure destroyed 55 Jap planes. General MacArthur described the action as a complete victory and a major disaster to the enemy. In June, the Allied armies celebrated the occupation of Tunis with a spectacular victory march through the town, with Generals Eisenhower, Giraud, Alexander, and Anderson at the saluting base. 28,000 troops from all parts of the French Empire, every state in America, and from the British Commonwealth of Nations were in the parade. Later came news of the King's visit to North Africa, a stimulating surprise for everyone over there and over here. The cheers of fighting men greeted His Majesty at every yard of his triumphal tour. July brought us the heartening news of the invasion of Sicily. A splendid array of ships took strong forces to the stepping stone of Hitler's back door. It was by no means a walkover, but with powerful air and sea support, the Grand Eighth Army and our American allies were soon being landed on the island springboard. An action unprecedented in military history. Amazing coordination of effort and swift execution by the combined services. The occupation of Sicily was the first step to Italy itself, where Mussolini, Hitler's little dog, was fooling himself that he reigned supreme. But we were soon to learn that Benito Mussolini, the sawdust Caesar, had fallen from his cardboard pedestal. The strutting peacock would strut no more. The best news of the 8th month was of the U-boat situation. We learned that convoys were crossing the Atlantic in greater safety, while Nazi submarine wolf packs were suffering increasingly severe losses to the tune of one every day. RAF raids on enemy-occupied territory were stepped up, and treetop attacks were a feature of the newsreels around this time. This particular one was against a naval stores depot at Rennes. But perhaps the best news of all was of shattering blows against Berlin, the heart of the German war machine. It may not look it from a great height, but this assault was 4 times heavier than the Luftwaffe's biggest raid on London. Early in September came the second in the series of Churchill travels, the Quebec Conference, at which the Premier conferred with President Roosevelt and Mr. Mackenzie King, Canada's Prime Minister. On the anniversary of the day on which Britain declared war on Germany, the Allied invasion of the Italian mainland began. General Montgomery's gallant 8th Army landed on the soil of the lesser partner of the Axis. It was to prove the shortest invasion in history, for on that same day came the Italian capitulation, news of which was broadcast by General Eisenhower to the 4 corners of the earth. One sentence told all there was need to tell.
The Italian government has surrendered its armed forces unconditionally.
Admiral Cunningham called on the Italian fleet to sail for Allied ports. Most of the ships did, for Italian reaction against their former masters was breaking out. This was the start of her revenge for being kicked around by the Nazis. In October, the Allies occupied Naples. British troops were the first to enter the city, the biggest prize at that date to fall to the Allies. The populace received our men with open arms and mouths. Perhaps the most heart-stirring story of the year was the return home of repatriated prisoners of war. Marks of suffering were blended with smiles as the great gulf of separation, which for so many months and years memory and love alone had spanned, was closed. A day of joy bordering so close to tears when we welcomed our brave lads back to home, sweet home. Through the long months, the vast Russian front had been the scene of terrific drives by Marshal Stalin against the Nazi hordes. Roosevelt's "they're going to get it" declaration was echoed by a Soviet spokesman when he said, "We shall hit them as never before. They shall pay for everything." As winter came, our Russian allies switched their offensive to the northern front, hurling their weight at the tottering enemy only 50 miles from the old Polish border. At this conference, clear-cut plans for the prosecution of the war in general, and particularly against Japan, were agreed. Then came the Tehran Conference, this time between Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin. They set the stage for the unprecedented efforts to be made finally to overthrow the forces of evil. We pray that God will grant them health and strength to continue their heavy task of shaping the destiny of the world. As we look forward with confidence to 1944, we close with a time-honored wish to you all, a Happy New Year.